kiss for you.
All right, today we're going to be looking at my opinion on why I feel like there's a lot of apathy and a lot of kind of indifference to a lot of games that are releasing, and I kind of title this as moving back or the sludge of the past, because I'm really interested in seeing like there is, both in the AAA and indie sphere, a lot of this feeling that things aren't as interesting as they used to be, even regardless of the concern about remakes and sequels. Things that are reviewing well are not selling well, regardless of the intention behind them or how good the quality is and all that. And so I think I kind of want to start off on the fact that, for example, Ape Adventures 2 was a very highly reviewed indie game, right? 89 here, and a lot of reputable sources giving it a high score. And yet you check, and obviously Steam charts is not the only way, but for an indicator, right? This game is only available on PC, and it released last year, so a very, hectic year. Got very good review scores, and you can see the overall reviews, 212 reviews positive, 10 reviews negative. That is a very low, now it is at 86%, but that is a very low amount of reviews and a very low amount of players for a game that reviewed very highly. You can even check that with more recent stuff. UFO 50, only released on PC. 90, very high review score. This is like an old school collection of on PC only. Check the Steam, and good amount. 4,000 is pretty good for this kind of thing. Look at the reviews, right? 3,300, 131. Like, that is, relatively speaking, a success compared to these other ones. But even then, like, that is not a lot of reviews for how highly rated this game is. And you can kind of compare that to something like Chained Echoes, which released, in 2019? And that also got very high reviews. And look at that, and it's like, okay, even lower, right? Chained Echoes only had a 2,000 peak. Now this is concurrent, right? And so you check other things like the review amount, 5,000. You go back, you see, okay, 3,000. This one's 5,000. Chained Echoes had a lot more conversation about it. And even then, you see a relatively low compared to, the reviews and stuff about it. And the reason I'm talking about this is because you do see successes in this space, right? And even what I talked about with Just Gems with Core Keeper, right? Core Keeper, when that game released, look at that, 46,000 in that peak, and what it was doing before that was, in the 3,000, 4,000, 6,000 range. 39,000 positive reviews, right? This released earlier this year. You can check other things like Enshrouded, right? That was a very popular survival game. Let's see how that did. 160,000 people, 24,000 people playing right now. Max time frame, 27,000, 15,000, at its lowest about 7,000, 49,000 positive reviews. So there are successes in the indie space. The reason I'm highlighting them is because it is a very big contrast. It is not all indies are losing or anything like that, but it's very telling where like some of them that get high reviews don't go anywhere, and other ones end up doing really well. It's also important to note both Enshrouded and Core Keeper. Enshrouded is still in early access, and Core Keeper started in early access, right? Comparatively speaking, and so there is obviously that opportunity for a 1.0 push. But like Enshrouded right now isn't in a 1.0, and it's still getting very respectable numbers and a very good response compared to these other indies that are just not doing anything. And I think it's kind of telling where there are outbreaks. There are Core Keeper and Enshrouded and Palworld and stuff. But it feels like a large quantity of these very highly rated games are not hitting and are not being sold and are not selling well. You don't see, like Enshrouded said, hey, we hit 1 million copies. Core Keeper's like, hey, we hit 1 million copies. You don't see that same response and that same level of enthusiasm for these titles, which I think is definitely quite telling. That people are responding well to them, but they're not buying them. And so you can kind of see, even, I guess that's a more indicator of success. You see something like Hades 2, which got 100,000 concurrent players and was a very big deal compared to Hades 1, which is 54,000. Hades 1 was obviously a very big breakout game with, as you can see, 265,000 very high reviews. Hades here is 46,000. Now, obviously, there's a 4-year difference there in terms of the amount, and I'm not looking at reviews, but I am seeing the fact that like people were, Hades won a lot of Game of the Year and a lot of that kind of stuff. Hades 2, while still being in early access, I don't feel that same excitement. Now, not to say there isn't any excitement for the game. People are saying it's very good. It's just, it comes back to this point where I kind of wanted to make a video on like more sequels and how the extra sequels and things kind of diminish everything. But I can kind of just talk about that here. Not only are you seeing this lack of interest in majority, I would say, of newer indie titles, but you're also seeing this sequel fatigue hit everything. these aren't bad sequels, but they are sequels. They do not feel purposeful, right? They are not, hey, we made Hades 2. If you liked Hades 1, you're gonna like Hades 2. It's ideal for people that played it, that want more Hades. I played Hades. I enjoyed Hades. I don't want more of it. Hades 2 doesn't do anything for me, right? Same thing with Forza. Forza Horizon 5 came out. Forza Horizon 4 came out, and that was a game everyone was pretty excited for. It's like, oh my god, look at this thing. It looks great. It's in, all that stuff. The season looked pretty good. And that, because of that, now this came out on Steam a little bit later, so these aren't super relevant, but in terms of reception, like Forza 5 got better reception than Forza 4. But I didn't see nearly as many people talking about Forza 5 as Forza 4. 4 was the talk about the seasons and the DLC and the Lego DLC they brought back and that stuff. And then 5, on top of its DLC, didn't really seem to hit that. It reviewed better, which I was surprised at because I personally didn't really like Forza 5. It just kind of felt like more of the same without that unique kind of situation where the seasons happened. This one was kind of like, hey, we're in Mexico, you get to do some things about the jungle and stuff. And it's like, that didn't really do much for me. But overall, I mean, you look at that and you're like, that's a AAA game. That was I think $60 or maybe $70 game. And that was like their big, Xbox's big flagship thing. And while the sentiment and the critic response was, I don't think this game sold that well. I have a feeling that 4 sold better, and that could obviously be on part DLC, but I do think it's also sequel fatigue. I think it's the fact that Forza Horizon 3, 4, and 5 are pretty similar. However, 3 had the multiple festivals thing, so going between different festivals and building them up, and it was in the Australian outback, and 4 had the seasons, and the seasons were very nice because they let you kind of just change the environment and the kind of like atmosphere of the game. Screenshots. Change the environment and atmosphere of the game depending on if it was like snow or not, right? And that changed what you could do and what cars were useful and that kind of stuff. You don't see that with, these other games like Forza 5 and other, Crew Motorsport and stuff like that are kind of trying to be as close as possible to Forza. You don't see that in these sequels. And so I think that really kind of hurts its potential. It still gets players, but I just, it's that feeling. It's that news cycle, that interest in the game. It doesn't feel as big. So what I really want to kind of wrap this up by saying is, like, there are breakouts, right? We saw both AAA with Hogwarts Legacy and Indie with Palworld. There are breakouts, and there's going to be surprise hits and things you don't expect. But it really feels like in trying to move back into the past by doing things like sequels and releases of games and types that have already been done before, you lose a lot of that motivation and a lot of that purpose that people, I think, are looking for, right? Palworld, fundamentally speaking, is just Ark Survival Evolved with like a Pokemon Legends Arceus kind of setup. And that worked really well because people like those two things, right? Hogwarts Legacy, relatively speaking, is a new game, but if you like something like Shadow of War or Shadow of Mordor, it's pretty similar to that except with the Harry Potter skin. You have Forza, you played 3 or 4, you've played 5. You have Hades 2, you played Hades 1, you played Hades 2, right? Enshrouded is a little bit different, and that's why I say it was definitely a surprise hit. But overall, it is similar to Keen's other game, which is Portal Knights, and that at the time did pretty well for itself as well. And the reason I kind of bring all this up is to kind of set the stage for the fact that I believe that because this enthusiasm is waning for, either sequels in the case of like Hades or Forza, or just generally new games that don't tend to sell really well, like UFO 50 or 8-Bit Adventures 2, you start seeing companies do what they're doing now, which is bringing back all 3 big ones. Fortnite brought back its OG map and its OG mechanics permanently for December. Apex Legends and a new Into the Rift mode launched a launch royale with the original map and the original weapons and original champions and stuff like that. And then Overwatch did an Overwatch Classic, which is a temporary 3-week mode, bringing back 6v6 and 2 tanks and all the original busted abilities and all that, right? And so all 3 of them, and COD as well, is kind of doing a little bit with Warzone. And so you have all these 3 in the same, 2 weeks saying, hey, we're going back to what made all these things great and what you remember from 1, 2, and 3. And you're seeing that happen because you're seeing the only things that end up being a success are stuff that is pretty derivative. Now, I do want to also make a mention that that is not a bad thing that we have stuff like Fortnite OGs coming back. I think the way Fortnite does it, like they tend to keep doing, is the best option. It's a permanent mode you can opt into. You want to play the OG Fortnite, you can do that. There's going to be zero build. There's going to be build mode, so you can experiment with the original map with no building, which wasn't an option before. Right, you have things like their other modes. They're more active in the current season modes, as well as there are things that Fortnite lets you do with the user-generated content space. I think having a permanent mode like this is pretty good because it's not just like a gimmick event. right? The Apex and the Overwatch 1 are gimmick events. They're, hey, remember this thing, have fun in it, a couple weeks, and that's gone. Fortnite, I believe, did that with the OG map before, but now it's permanently coming back, and I do think that's a good addition, but I overall think that even still, like, for me, someone who doesn't play Fortnite, and went back into it a couple times to look at the new user-generated stuff, this doesn't interest me, even though I was one of the people that played it in those original days. Because to me, Fortnite OG is still relatively new. Now, I know it's been, 2018 or whatever, it's been technically 6 years since this map was introduced, but to me it feels new because my only other experience with the Fortnite map is, I believe, Chapter 3's map. So whatever chapter we're on now, and if they're still using chapters to base their, seasons, I guess. I remember the first one, and then, which is this OG map, and then the Chapter 3 map. And so to me, it's still relatively new, even though I know it's been 6 years since the OG map. And so for lapsed players like me, this isn't going to make me come back to Fortnite. What's going to make me come back is my friend saying, hey, there's a new thing on Fortnite, let's check it out, right? And so I think that's kind of maybe the case with a lot of these. I see people talking about something like UFO 50, but not saying, hey, you need to play this. They're saying, hey, this is a really interesting experience, and it's all that, and this is surprisingly good for what it is, but it doesn't fit, there's not that motivation to go and play it right now, right? And I think a lot of that, even something in the more creative aspects, there isn't a desperate need to play Palworld right now or Hogwarts, unless, in Palworld's case, you have other people that are also jumping on, right? They're all being based on that fear of missing out. And so while I say that, sequels and stuff are definitely needed and are definitely good, right? And I can point to some examples, but overall, you're not gonna be interested in this kind of thing unless other people are already interested in. I don't think Helldivers would have been as successful as it is, even with its technically unique mechanics, without that 4-player co-op sort of thing and how many people jumped on this train to do it, right? If it had launched with that PSM requirement that blocked 180 countries or whatever it was from being able to be played, then you wouldn't see as much success that Helldivers currently has because of that. And we've talked about Helldivers before and its kind of issues and what it's going through right now with that PSM requirement, but it's still holding, a very respectable amount of players and a good amount of reviews and responses and all that. But what you end up seeing is that because you have all these things that are returning back to their roots, that motivation is solely driven by effectively other people. It's that fear of missing out mechanic that we basically need to drive into people to get them to play our game. Now, the last thing I'll mention is that even though that is the case, and I do believe that this whole push to sequels is like a very big thing, that is not, a foolproof, bulletproof strategy. Silent Hill 2 remake is a phenomenal example of how to do it very well. And how to actually, that and the Dead Space remake were ones that, hey, we're going to take the original and we're going to put it up to modern standards, modern graphics, modern control schemes, the sensibilities just in terms of the structure of the game and the voice acting, all that, make these incredible experiences and absolutely worth getting into and experiencing because of how well they use that remake potential. There was a lot of buzz and a lot of hope on these games. Now, because of that, you need to play them. And I think that is kind of something that people kind of forget about games, is that they're only super experiential in game form if you are the one playing it. Like, I haven't played this game personally and robbed myself of that by watching other people play it. I think I would have had a much better experience watching this game if I was also playing it, And I think we can talk about this all the time, but if people aren't playing this Silent Hill 2, you're not going to get that same experience of the story rather than just watching it, right? And so I think that's a very critical thing that a lot of people kind of forget, is that, like, all these games, you can watch someone have fun with it and all that, but the true experience to a lot of these games, especially something like Silent Hill, is to actually play them. And you need people to do that, and you need availability, but you also need attention and purpose and intent and motivation to play these games. If people aren't interested in playing your game, we have seen very clearly what that ends up doing, right? Very highly reviewed games getting basically nowhere, no attention, because there's not that motivation by a bunch of people to play it. Which is why I think now more than ever, you need people to highlight these things. And not just indies, AAA, AA, any experience that people think should get more eyes on it need to be highlighted, which is why I'm going on the Just Gems series and talking about, hey, check out this game, it's very good, check out this game, look how interesting and new mechanics and all that, right? And so I hope you like that, but that's a main reason. It's because I really hope to get more people to just be playing and experiencing a wider variety of games, and I think they really do now. So hopefully that made sense. If you have any opinions about this and you think, all the remakes are doing great, or you want more of it, or you think, yeah, no, I definitely agree that, some games aren't doing as well as they should, then definitely leave your experience with this down below, and I'll make sure to check it out and respond. So yeah, I'll see everyone in the next video.